We are definitely, maybe, probably going to war with Venezuela.
Breaking news, a dramatic U.S.-led escalation in the Caribbean. What the Navy calls the largest warship ever built, along with fighter jets, heading to the waters off Latin America. The administration claims the goal is to stop international drug traffickers.
Man, can you just stop piloting the boat? You're not even getting paid, man.
Provocative move comes as the Pentagon announced another overnight strike on a suspected drug boat. The 10th strike in 52 days, at least 43 people killed in total. And President Trump telling reporters these attacks may just be the tip of the iceberg.
I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay, we're going to kill them. You know, they're going to be like dead.
And CNN is reporting tonight that the president is considering plans to target cocaine facilities inside Venezuela. Now, the lack of transparency about these plans, especially the deadly attacks on alleged drug boats, have an increasing number of Republicans doing something they don't do much these days, criticizing the Trump White House.
The administration needs to give insight into Congress. That's part of it. If this was happening with this level of insight under the Biden administration, I'd be apoplectic.
And as tensions spike across the...
Also, I know we tend to forget this, but when engaging in acts of war, you're not supposed to give Congress insight. You are supposed to receive from Congress permission. I know we don't do that anymore, but...
Caribbean, President Trump is now just hours away from leaving for a...
I don't know if you'll see this, Vosh, but it's been confirmed the people struck are all literally fishermen. Well, yeah, of course. The only evidence that's been provided by the MAGA movement is like the White House has shown grainy footage that ended up being from different images or news stories. Like they were like, oh, you really think that this wasn't a narco boat? And then they show a picture from like, yeah, the Syrian civil war. Exactly. What we're doing is kind of unprecedented in its boldness, which is we're openly committing war crimes, but they're not hidden. Like the president posts videos of them on Truth Social, it brags about them. Of course they're not narco boats. You know what they would do if they were? Take some drone footage before blasting them so they could use it as evidence. They would go, yeah, look at this boat before we blew it up. See how it looked? They don't do that because they're just blowing up fishing boats. And all of this, by the way, is being made on the assumption that the way drugs are getting into this country is by little speedboats setting off from the Venezuelan coast and going all the way north to America, landing and smuggling them in.
High-stakes trip to Asia, where he's scheduled to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. Their first meeting since President Trump was reelected, and it comes as U.S.-China relations are now at their lowest point in years. Kristen Holmes is out front live at the White House. Kristen, the president has been focused very much on these strikes in the Caribbean, but he is about to have one of the most important meetings of his second term in Asia.
Yeah, there is a lot internationally going on for the president as he embarks on this trip. And just to dive into what's happening in the Caribbean, I mean, you mentioned this warship, these fighter jets, all of this really represents...
Isn't this what the Coast Guard is for? Well, the Coast Guard would be for if you wanted to arrest them. If you want to just blow these boats up, then you would use the Navy. Of course, that's illegal. There is no legal mechanism for accusing a person of a crime, drug trafficking, and then just killing them with no trial. That is not a thing the president can do or authorize or order. But, you know.
A potentially massive military escalation. I mean, this is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening at the same time. President Trump has confirmed that the CIA is operating in Venezuela. He has said a number of times and increased the rhetoric around the idea of land strikes in Venezuela. Now, of course, we have reported that all of this is part of a broader strategy to eventually oust Maduro. But White House officials say the president is considering a number of options. One of them you mentioned was this targeting of cocaine facilities. I do have to note, I mean, Venezuela is is not known as a major source of cocaine. So that's just something to keep in mind as the administration has tried to link Maduro to these drug trades. The other one that they were considering is striking actual drug trafficking routes. But again, President Trump has not made any decisions. And we should say that while these escalations, these tensions are rising in one region, there is a lot of hope that President Trump's trip to Asia is going to help de-escalate tensions in another, particularly that relationship with China. I mean, we have been in what we've all been a
No, probably not.
part of, this kind of back and forth trade war.
Is it a coincidence that Maria Corina Machado won the Nobel Prize, or are they complicit in U.S. imperialism? They're complicit in U.S. imperialism. She's explicitly said, like, America, take over Venezuela. I will give your businesses money. I will be like, I will be a grateful colonial stooge for you. The Nobel Peace Organization is fully complicit in this. It has nothing to do with what she's done. Like all big institutions, they are compliant to or subservient to capital.
Since President Trump was sworn into office, the relationship between China and the U.S. is at an all-time low. And there are a lot of people who are deeply concerned that we are on the wrong track and that we're going to lose other allies in the region who want to trade with China. So this is an opportunity for President Trump to work with those allies as well as to sit down face to face with President Xi. But Dana, I'll tell you, they are really trying to manage expectations on that sit down. Maybe they learned from the sit down with Vladimir Putin.
Oh, yeah. Maria. Again, this is the Nobel Peace Prize winner who has done nothing for the nation of Venezuela except say, don't you worry, guys, one day America will invade and I'll lead once they do. Did a Rumble stream with Don Jr., Nobel Peace Prize. Triggered with Donald Trump Jr.
Forget about Saudi Arabia. Forget about the Saudis. I mean, we have more oil. I mean, infinite potential. And we're going to open markets. We're going to kick off the government from the oil sector. We are going to privatize all our industry. Venezuela has huge resources: oil, gas, minerals, land, technology. And as you said before, we have a strategic location, hours from the United States. So
she did prove the election was rigged. Doug, Maduro was right to bar her from the election. She's literally a national traitor. Like, this is insane. This would be like letting the Soviets, like, running a Politburo elections, and John CIA is like getting a bunch of suspicious money and support. Like, what? This is crazy. It was completely correct.
We're going to do this right. We know what we have to do. And American companies are in, super strategic position to invest. This country, Venezuela, is going to be the brightest opportunity for investment of American companies.
Jesus Christ. You don't have to be this straightforward about it, man. You have to, like, pretend you care about Venezuela too.
Of good people that are going to make a lot of money
in Alaska, that they shouldn't get ahead of their skis.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's a lot to learn there. Kristen, thanks so much for your reporting. Appreciate it. Fareed, it's so good to see you. What do you think? Let's start in the Caribbean, where I just left off. What do you think of this massive military buildup? Is it really about drug trafficking or about trying to force regime change in Venezuela, or both?
Dana, you're focusing on the right issue. It is a massive buildup and a massive escalation. Look, we probably now have more troops.
It's 100% legal to depose Maduro, by the way. I don't know what I don't like Maduro. She's just a traitor and a foreign asset. Like, that's a fact. Is that really the best Venezuela has to offer? Is that the best the Nobel Peace Prize Committee can really drudge up there? A lady crowing to the son of the president of the United States that she's going to open and privatize Venezuelan oil so American investors can make lots of money. She doesn't even talk about the Venezuelan people, man. Also, it is debatable whether, like, it would be worse or better under her. Like, she wants to be a colonial asset. Do you know what has happened historically to countries that have been treated that way?
In that area, in that region, the Caribbean and Latin America, naval troops than at any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Wow.
You're talking about 10,000 American troops, 8, 9 major carriers. And it is unclear what the purpose is, because the ostensible purpose, as you say, is all about drugs.
It's not debatable, man. You don't know how shit it is back home. No, it is debatable. I'm sorry, if America invaded and set her up as a puppet leader, do you think that Venezuela would be democratic? Do you think that's what happens when America invades banana republic countries in Latin America and sets up their own leaders to allow them to privatize business? Do you think that what then happens is a democracy? Or do you think that she would just keep all of Maduro's strongmen to help them keep reign over the country and would continue to crack down on dissent just while allowing for more American investment, so even less money stays in the country? This has literally happened before. Like it's usually pretty bad.
But as one of your previous guests was saying, Venezuela is not the font of all the drug trafficking coming into the United States. It's a terrible regime, make no mistake, and Maduro is a terrible guy. But if this is an effort at regime change, it would be very important to have thought through the entire sequence of events that are going to take place, how this is going to work out. Donald Trump, in many ways, came to power breaking with Republican Orthodox.
I would rope if I were South American listening to Vosh talk as though he knew anything about the country. Well, based on the way you phrased that, you're not South American, so I'm wondering on what basis of knowledge and involvement you're acting so aggrieved over, you know? Do you, what have I said that's disagreeable? Like that Pinochet is also really bad in addition to Maduro? Are we doing like the Red Scare anti-communism in Latin America thing? Like Maduro is really, really bad, but usually what happens, like the worst parts of Maduro's leadership aren't ideological. They're a consequence of autocracy and corruption and people who are loyal largely to themselves. If you invade and do regime change with no broader plan for reinvestment or development in the country, we've literally seen this happen like many times before in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, where the new dictator that we put in charge suppresses elections just as much, but then takes advantage of the prior power structure, avoids shaking things up too much by just reincorporating those autocrats, those strongmen, in order to maintain like the carceral state, you know? Like, why shake that up? It's just like, that's just a fact. That's not defending Maduro. It's just a fact. And then you do realize what happens after that then. Then any people opposing the new regime have to contend both with it and America. So good luck with that. You know, you're having a hard enough time deposing Maduro, who's incompetent and unpopular, but look forward to your next leader who's incompetent, unpopular, but also a million American companies have a vested financial interest in their continued reign, and America will use their military to continue to defend it. Banana Republic shit.
By pointing out that the Iraq war had been a fiasco, by pointing out that the Libyan intervention had been a fiasco. He had been initially in very Donald Trump-like way, he had been in favor of the intervention, sort of, and then when it turned sour, he said the Libyan intervention was a mistake and Gaddafi should have stayed in power. All of which is to just say, if there is a move toward regime change, if this is some kind of a quiet or escalating war to get Maduro out of power, you'd want to have thought through the day after, the week after, the month after, because Venezuela could easily collapse into chaos. And then, you know, if you think we have seen a lot of Venezuelan migrants, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting and important that you say that, because I was thinking about that same dynamic, that this is a man who has been saying, I want to end wars, I want things to calm down. And
I remember
it's
that.
not necessarily definitive that he's trying to start a war. It could be a show of force. It could be a lot of different things, and moving such a huge military presence into the Caribbean. But is there evidence that those steps that you're describing the day after, or what would happen if Maduro is actually overthrown, or if he steps down, what would happen?
Well, we have the opposition leader, Machado, who just won the Nobel Prize and who's been very supportive of Trump and, in fact, said she dedicated the prize to him, which was all a very clever political way of keeping him engaged and supportive. But just remember, there's always in these regimes, I mean, this is what we learned in Iraq, in Afghanistan, there's always still the remnants of the old regime, the army, the secret police, who are going to mount an assault on whatever new government comes into power. There will be a kind of civil war there. Have we thought all that through?
Well, wait, hold on. Often that's not what happens. Often what happens is that the old guard just sides with the new dictator because it's just business as usual to them. Like, if you're a bunch of government-affiliated gang leaders or like secret police or whatever who worked under Maduro, and oh, here's a new dictator, why not just serve the new dictator? Again, these aren't ideological differences. Now, he's kind of correct here. The old guard in Iraq were the guys who started ISIS. That's complicated. That's complicated. That's complicated. That's very messy. And part of that also is because America didn't just do a regime change in Iraq. We stuck around and engaged in this project of mass killing and arrest of everyone associated with Saddam, But if you're literally just cutting the head off Maduro and replacing him with some stooge, I mean, and that didn't work out either. I acknowledge that's complicated. But look what happened with Afghanistan and Iraq anyway, We put in like stooge governments that are more preoccupied with kids than they are actually nation building, and then eventually it all falls apart. Afghanistan fell apart the nanosecond our boys pulled out, the Taliban took back over, and then Iraq, the Iraqi government is pathetic, completely inept, and the country is like a border proxy regime for Iran.
I wonder, by the way, Dana, if this is part of the reason Admiral Halsey, the ranking admiral, resigned in a slightly mysterious way, that he felt like perhaps there was some of this escalation taking place without without thinking it through. I'm not sure. Of course, I'm speculating, but it was a very strange and abrupt resignation.
Let's turn to China and more broadly the Asia trip that the president is about to take. It's a very high stake.
What do we do right in Germany that we failed to do in all those other nations? I really think, genuinely, I think it's that our civilization was comparable to theirs. We were able to integrate ourselves into the post-war German nation, and we had an understanding of the way their legal, business, political structures work together, and we were able to spend years kind of like, here's an example. Nothing we did worked in Afghanistan because we tried to do everything from Kabul, but the real power centers in Afghanistan were like a distributed, decentralized system of tribal leadership, which we have no ability to replace or influence, right? What are we going to do? Put in new tribal leaders? That. And Iraq, likewise, to an extent, it's complicated. There are big differences between us and the Iraqi people. Cultural ones, of course, not innate ones, but there's still pretty big gulfs. Whereas Germany was very, very similar to American, British, French, so on. We had a better understanding of how to like assimilate into, work with, alter. We knew the system better, so we could copy and paste and cut and snip and so on. And honestly, the same with Japan. By the end of World War II, Japan was pretty well industrialized. I won't say westernized because I think that's a very complicated term. I would say that in many respects, the Japanese government and society was westernized, and in many respects, it wasn't. But another big part of it, I think, also is that like defeat in Japan and Germany was total, absolute, overwhelming, and crushing. Whereas in Iraq, and in Afghanistan, I mean, we didn't even beat the Taliban. The Taliban just fled into the mountains where we couldn't follow them, It's complicated. It's complicated. Keep in mind, we did invest a lot of money and time into Japan and Germany. But I think it's also a cultural element. I do not think we would be able to do any kind of like effective regime change in Venezuela. Because a lot of the power in Venezuela comes from like a disorganized kleptocracy nepotism, and gang leaders, right? Like cartel networks. We have no ability to influence those. It's not like just replacing bureaucratic leaders or whatever, like we can't do anything about the drug lords. We can kill them, but then the next guy takes over. It doesn't.
Meeting that he is going to have with President Xi. And you say the bullying approach that President Trump has used to get his way won't necessarily work with China for a very specific reason. What is it?
Well, Trump actually is very smart about understanding when he has leverage and when he doesn't. So with the
Okay, yeah.
Back on North Korea, they say that in order to have talks with the U.S., they have to be recognized as a nuclear power. Is that something you're open to?
Well, I think they are sort of a nuclear power. I mean, I know how many weapons they have. I know everything about them. And I've had a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. When you say they have to be recognized as a nuclear power, well, they got a lot of nuclear weapons, I'll say that. Okay, go ahead, Liz.
What kind of land targets in Venezuela do you want to strike? And how do you decide which ones to strike?
Well, we're going to see with Venezuela. I can tell you one thing. We stopped all drugs virtually from coming in by sea. And we'll stop all drugs from coming in by land very shortly. You'll see that starting. They're not going to want to do that. They're not going to want to do that. But you're going to see drugs stopping coming into our country, just like we stopped prisoners and drug dealers, drug addicts, we have stopped virtually everybody from coming in, other than people that want to come in legally. We have a lot of people coming in legally, passing tests, going through a process.
A lot of Latin American politics and militaries is interpersonal quid pro quo. Yeah, can I say another, I think if I were to really boil it down, one of the big things that made it possible for us to do the nation building in Japan and Germany that's been difficult elsewhere is that some countries believe in the supremacy of bureaucracy and some countries don't. There are countries where family ties, nepotism, kleptocracy, tribal leaderships, gang leadership, whatever else, have a lot of power. And there are countries where at the end of the day, everyone fits in a flowchart. And I think that Germany and Japan, with the exception of the emperor, who was of course factored in, right, with the, exonerated surrender, so on. But Japan is like that too? No, Japan is highly, highly bureaucratic. Whatever their feelings of family, right? Like Japan, especially post-World War II, right? Like highly militarized, fascist government, very regimented. Fascism is very bureaucratic. Well, they hate the bureaucracy, but it always ends up being highly bureaucratic anyway, because everyone becomes subsumed by the state. It's a whole mess. It's a whole thing, Yeah, Japan isn't tribal at all. I don't know. I think it might come down to that to an extent, and I think that it's you can assign this to a country being more or less primitive. I do think that tribal relations are more primitive socially than highly bureaucratic ones. But I guess if that makes you more resistant to nation building, regime change, that kind of thing, I guess that works out in your favor. From a colonial perspective. I'm not really sure. I think you're relying a bit on stereotypes here. Yeah, I'm speaking generally, but I still think it's true. You think this might be one of the reasons why Lebanon turned out the way that it did, right? The Lebanese government is bureaucratic and regimented, and as such has been kind of subsumed into the colonial power structure to an extent. And the official Lebanese government is not militant or whatever. But then you have Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is much less bureaucratic, much more based on those tribal interpersonal quid pro quos, and as a consequence, they remain like an insurgency. I don't know. I mean, it's a general
process, but we don't have people coming in from prisons and from mental institutions and the drug dealers. We don't have them coming in. We have almost nobody. We really have nobody. If you know it, for 5 months in a row, they had 0 people come in, and we used to have 1 million and 2 million and 3 million.
It's more that bureaucracy cannot establish supremacy without a monopoly on violence. And it's easier to establish a monopoly on violence when everything in the state has already been kind of ground into the bureaucracy and you can get the bureaucracy to surrender, as opposed to, again, power being distributed across a bunch of familial relationships and so on. Yeah, well,
Atención.
What?
Domingo. El pueblo de los Estados Unidos lo sabe. Se están inventando una nueva guerra eterna.
Agreed. That's a nice work shirt.
Prometieron que más nunca se metían en una guerra y se están inventando una guerra que nosotros vamos a evitar. ¿Con qué? Con la movilización de los pueblos de América del
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the US has carried out its 10th deadly strike on an alleged drug smuggling boat in the Caribbean. He says all 6 people on board were killed. Just yesterday, President Donald Trump said he'll keep...
Did you guys see that after one of these strikes, there were some survivors and they just repatriated the survivors rather than arresting them? Was that real or did I hallucinate that? They're like, these drug traffickers are so evil and dangerous, they need to be killed immediately. And then some survive and the Navy is like, and just brings them back because none of them are criminals. They're just random people. Yes, to Colombia and Ecuador, known Venezuelan countries.
Ordering the strikes without asking permission from Congress. Mr. Trump also denied that the US sent a B-1 bomber like this one to fly near the coast of Venezuela on Thursday. Flight trackers clocked it about 80 kilometers from the mainland. It's not clear if the aircraft entered Venezuelan airspace. But the show of force and soaring tensions have Venezuela on edge. Its government have been holding military drills as President Nicolas Maduro issued this message in English.
Not war, not war, not war. Just peace, just peace, just peace, forever, forever, forever. Peace forever.
Very good.
No crazy war.
Very good.
CNN contributor Stefano Pozzebon is live for us in Caracas. That was a pretty clear message there from Maduro. What else are you...
Actually kind of funny how bad his English is, you know? No crazy war or whatever. I don't... What was that? That was almost French. That was like that one lady with the TikToks, you know? What is that glowing honey? What is it doing? They're going to use it for war. That one, you know, you see which is the molten glass on the glass. You know what I'm talking about. I am scared. Yeah, no, she's iconic, really. Yeah, repatriating the survivors, man. I don't know. Yeah, pretty what we're doing here. Who knows where it's going to go.